Please welcome Executive Vice President and General Manager, Security and Collaboration, Cisco, Jeetu Patel.
Hello, everyone. Isn't it great to be in a live audience? Yeah. You know, little trivia about Rohit. So Rohit and I used to work together, and when I had my daughter, he was the first co-worker. I used to live in Chicago at the time, and we were working in California, so I was going back and forth. And when I was on paternity leave, he was the first co-worker that came out there to see my daughter. So it's so nice to share a stage with him. I know, look at that. So you know, it's great to be in person, but I used to have a superpower, and I've kind of lost it. I used to have a superpower which was 7 minutes flat. I could pack my bags to go for a week-long trip. I don't know if any of you folks feel this, but I'm feeling it right now, because yesterday it took me about 70 minutes of staring at my suitcase, and I still forgot a bunch of things. My entire product line for my hair was like, I left it at home, so it took me a while to get ready. So today, if you feel like I'm a little disheveled, it's because I left my hairline product at home. I'm feeling a little disrespected here. It seems like that wasn't a joke, that was the truth. Anyway, it's good to be here. And if you take away the jokes though, and just actually rewind back a few years and what it was like in just booking travel and the amount of work that you'd have to do. You'd have to make multiple calls, you'd have to go on multiple websites, you'd have to go to multiple companies and deal with making sure that you get your hotel done, right? You went to your car rental place, you also got your kind of flights booked. Today, you don't have that issue. Today, you actually go to a single site and you've got this fluidity of exchange of data and everything's pretty interconnected. And you're able to go out and in a matter of minutes, just go out and get your reservations booked. And this kind of interconnectedness is something that most of us have learned to expect out of day-to-day life, whether it be within your personal situation or at work. And what you're starting to see is that there's a tremendous amount of benefit of having this interconnectedness, but what you also see is there's a fair amount of security challenges that come along with it. And so if you look at malware or phishing attacks or ransomware, these are growing at double and triple digit kind of rates as you move forward. And this interconnectedness itself is actually, it's not just something that's impacting you, but every single member of the supply chain, your customers, your suppliers, your partners. When there's something that happens to them, it impacts you, right? And so there's this kind of ecosystem that we're living in right now. And in this interconnected world, there's a simple but massively overlooked problem that I want to spend this session talking about. But before we do that, what I wanted to do was make sure that we talk about 3 specific trends that our 300,000 customers are actually sharing with us. And by the way, this is going to be kind of a stacking of trends. So Rohit went through 3 trends. I'm going to go to 3 trends. I'm sure there's the next person that's going to come that's going to go through 3 trends, and you can then stack rank us and tell us which one's better. But the reality is that there's this key set of trends that we actually have that are becoming challenges in the industry that we really have to think about collectively as a society rather than individually. So let's talk about the first trend. The first trend is the fact that we as businesses are competing as holistic ecosystems, not as individual organizations by ourselves. What that means is that you yourself might be materially impacted in the way that your production line works, in the way that your supply chain works, in the way in which your demand cycle works based on what happens to the other members in the ecosystem. Now, what you're starting to see over here, and a great example of this is a top automaker recently. They had to stop the entire production line because one small component parts manufacturer was not able to protect themselves because they had a potential security breach. And so you had to have the entire production line stop. Now, what specifically are companies doing about this is they're starting to take a much more measured approach around risk and making sure that they can assess risk and say, well, you know, if I'm going to have vulnerabilities, the reality is you have newer and newer vulnerabilities that keep coming up every single day. But of the known vulnerabilities, here's a statistic that's fascinating. Of the known vulnerabilities that an organization knows, only 20% of them actually get remediated and patched and fixed. Only 20%. Think about that. And so what we need to do is make sure that we take a much more risk-based approach to vulnerability management. That's what's happening, and that's what more and more companies are doing. And they're starting to make sure that they take a more informed decision based on which specific vulnerabilities do I need to patch based on the highest amount of risk rather than first in, first out, so that I can make sure I have a better security posture. So that's the first trend. And associated and tied very closely to that first trend is the second trend, which is everyone is an insider. And what I mean by everyone is an insider is, firstly, humans are pretty easy targets to go after for cyber criminals, and attacks are becoming much more bespoke and personalized. They're going after Jeetu Patel rather than going after the entirety of the population that you might have. And so they're getting much more personalized, and more of these individual targets, whether they be employees, but you don't just have employees anymore. You have employees and contractors, but you have suppliers and customers and partners. So the amount of people that can go out and impact your security posture is getting larger and larger and larger. And so everyone's an insider. You're starting to see that. But specifically what's starting to happen, and here's another interesting statistic, is 56% of the breaches that happen because of an unknowing employee negligence act, rather than something that's actually malicious in intent. 56%. Now, if you really start thinking about this and go, no one's going to be working to plan to be negligent when they come into the office. No one says, hey, I'm coming into the office, I'm going to be negligent today. Right? But mistakes happen. And the reason for that is because the friction is too high, and because of the friction being high, the efficacy goes down. And so you have to make sure that those get balanced. In fact, an example over here is the Metropolitan Police. There was an employee that accidentally deleted 8.7 million records and slowed down prosecutions that impacted 17,000 cases, just out of pure negligence, right? And so when you start thinking about these pieces, the way that we're actually going out and attacking these problems is through zero trust. We're saying, well, let's make sure that we actually have the least privileged access that we can provide to people, and so there's a zero trust mechanism that's in place. And customers continually are needing to assess behavior and grant continuous assessment of risk and then grant trust, rather than making sure that that only happens at the time of login. So what you're now starting to see happen is, rather than saying, I'm only going to verify whether you are who you say you are and give you access at the time of login, I'm going to assess your behavior on a regular basis. And if you're doing something that's anomalous in nature, even though you might have logged in, even though you have access, I'm going to make sure I can intercept. And so that's what's happening from a zero trust standpoint. And the third major trend that you're seeing is something that we've all lived over the course of the past couple of years, and it's around hybrid work. People are going to work in mixed mode. Sometimes they're going to work in the office, sometimes they're going to work at home, sometimes they're going to be somewhere in between. And when you actually see this mixed mode of working, what's going to happen is you're going to be accessing data and systems from any device, whether it be managed or unmanaged. You're going to be accessing applications that are either sanctioned or unsanctioned, and you're going to be accessing them from networks that are either secured or unsecured. And you need to make sure that while you're accessing that, what do we specifically need to do so that we can make sure that the risk of breach is low, the risk of intellectual property theft is low. And this puts a lot of pressure on the SecOps team. It puts a lot of pressure on the NetOps team, right? And so specifically, what are we doing to go out and address this trend? And what's starting to happen is, rather than point solutions, you're starting to see integrated architectures take more and more prominence in this market. And when I talk about integrated architectures, I'm talking about networking and security coming together rather than being specifically separate islands by themselves. And to simplify management, we need to make sure that the management is simplified not just for the SecOps person, but also the NetOps person, and ideally do it in a way that's fluid. and also make sure that the user has the lowest amount of friction, because what you've now started seeing is, to what Rohit was talking about, you don't have to trade off security for convenience. What you're starting to see happen is when the friction goes down, your efficacy automatically goes up. So you're starting to see this integrated architecture come in place. So those are the three major trends that we're seeing in our customer base, which is businesses are competing as ecosystems, everyone's behaving like an insider, and hybrid work is here to stay and is actually causing far more challenge in how you can secure an organization with a tremendous amount of pressure. So what do we start to do about this entire area, and what's the big challenge that we're starting to see have happen that I talked about earlier? Well, the big challenge we see is that we need security resilience, just like you need business resilience, and just like you need operational resilience, there's a need for security resilience. Because there's a massive ripple effect, and the weakest link in your supply chain can bring down the entirety of your entire ecosystem. So what is happening today? Well, we have this construct that Wendy Nather, who by the way gave a great, was participating in the rap music earlier on, she's right there. She is the head of Cisco's advisory CISOs, and she coined this term called the security poverty line. And what does the security poverty line mean? It means that there's a baseline level of minimum security posture that every company should maintain. And when companies don't have the right level of resource or know-how to go out and maintain that, that's when they fall below the security poverty line. And what that does is puts the entirety of the ecosystem at risk, right? And so what we want to do is make sure that when this happens, you don't ignore the smaller companies, the not-for-profit companies that are participating, because 60% of small businesses that do have a cyber attack actually go out of business in 6 months. And so if you're below the security poverty line and you're actually participating in an ecosystem, not only are you going out and putting yourself at risk, but the entire ecosystem is at risk. Now, we collectively have to make sure that this problem gets solved. And so to talk a little bit more about that, what I wanted to have was my partner in crime, Shayla Shankar, who is the SVP and GM for the security business, to come over here and talk about the dimensions of the security poverty line, and specifically what we need to do collectively as a group to make sure that we can go out and address this issue. Because if we don't address the least prepared in the world for going out and preventing themselves, the most prepared will suffer. So with that, let me make sure that I invite Shayla Shankar on stage. Shayla, come on up.
Thank you, Jeetu. Security poverty line is real, is present, it's complex, and it's multidimensional. When you think about security poverty line, there are multiple factors for us to consider. Number one, first and foremost, it's budget. Organizations that are running on razor-thin margins will be hard-pressed to invest in security the way large organizations are able to invest in them. Then the second factor is the expertise. Even when organizations are aware that they are at risk, they may not actually be have the dedicated skills, they may not have the expertise, they may not have the experience to actually go attack the problem head on. And the third aspect to consider is capability. When you think about a capability, you are really thinking about knowing what needs to be done and being able to actually doing it. It's about the knowing-doing gap that we are trying to bridge. So what you find in this domain is organizations, while knowing what needs to be done, they may be faced with constraints. So constraints in the form of outsourced software or outdated hardware, or even regulatory controls that they have to address, all of that puts puts them on the back foot in being able to address them in the time that they need to address. And finally, influence. Large organizations are able to negotiate the right kind of terms with their vendors, suppliers, and partners the way the small organizations are not able to address. So when you put all this together, the budgetary constraints, lack of skill set and expertise, and the capability gaps, as well as the influence that these small organizations are not able to overcome, these tend to have far-reaching implications. So let me give you a specific example. Think about the ransomware attack that we saw with Blackbaud. Blackbaud is the world's largest organization. They deal with education administration, fundraising, and financial management system. That one ransomware attack on Blackbaud has impacted over 1,000 organizations, and many of them happen to be nonprofit organizations. Think about the ripple effect of that. When I think about nonprofit organizations, I actually think of them as critical infrastructure. When nonprofit organizations are not able to attend to the victims of violence, they're not able to be there in times of disaster, and when they're not able to feed the hungry even, then we are all impacted. So I'm not suggesting by any means that the nonprofit organizations are the only ones that are below the security poverty line. You must consider the critical infrastructure. Again, let me give you a real world example. Most of the nation's drinking water and water waste management systems are municipality owned. So think about margins under which those businesses are running. Their operating revenues are really very, very low, and it's really hard for them to invest what is needed to invest in cybersecurity. And compound that with what happened with another real life example. The Department of Justice recently indicted a former employee of a rural water management authority. And that former employee was allegedly, or he was accused, or allegedly, accessing or attempting to access the computer to tamper with the disinfectant levels of the water. So think about how the digital world is connected to the real world, and how a lack of knowledge, lack of capability, lack of expertise, lack of budget impacts not just businesses, it also impacts societies at large. So we must stand together. Jeetu alluded to it earlier. Let me quote a Native American proverb. We do not inherit the earth from our ancestors, we borrow it from our children. We must think of the future. We have to work together. This interconnected problem requires an interconnected approach to solving it. Shared risk calls for shared defenses. As an industry, we owe it to each other. I feel it's our civic duty to do this. For the past 30 years, Cisco has been at the forefront of connecting people and data. And Cisco is committed to making the world a safer place, a more secure place. Here are just a few things that we are doing to attack this problem, to address this problem. We are helping in times of crisis. We have partnered with 30+ critical infrastructure organizations and running security products 24/7, supporting critical customers in Ukraine. This is us lending our expertise to an area where the expertise is needed the most. We are sharing intelligence. As a founding member of the Cyber Threat Alliance, we partner with more than 33 global security vendors. We share our intelligence. The focus here is to make sure that customers of all these companies are protected while we're also defending the digital ecosystem. Next, we are helping to bolster the critical infrastructure. Here, let me give you another real-world example. We recently partnered with another county water authority in the rural part of the United States with a goal of automating the monitoring of the utilities industrial network. While at the same time, we are also helping them reduce the water loss in a water-scarce environment. That is, helping the critical infrastructure with the help that they needed. Now we are taking it a step further. We have recently announced a 5-year, $15 million partnership with NetHope. We are strengthening their efforts in cybersecurity in the non-governmental agencies. We are also doubling down our security product charitable grants going to the nonprofit sector. For the first time in this program, we are also including our cloud products. We're including Secure Access by Duo, we're including Secure Endpoint, and also our umbrella cloud security products. The challenges facing the organizations that are below the security poverty line are so large that no single organization can actually address. I welcome you all to work with us. I welcome you all to join us in making sure that we do right thing for this interconnected world. Join us in contributing what is needed to help these organizations get prepared and help them respond in times of crisis or in case of a breach. I say it again because we do this because we owe it to each other. We do it because it is our civic duty. Together we can do great things. Together we can make the world a better place, we can make the world a safer place, and we can most certainly make the world a secure place.
And folks, we are in a hyper-competitive industry right now. I think there's a bunch of vendors in this space, in this room, there's a bunch of customers that are in this room, and when we talk about competing with one another, competition is good because it makes us all better. But the real competition isn't each other. The real competition are the bad actors. And let's make sure that we can all join forces. I think there has to be a business model shift to make sure that people below the security poverty line are also kept secure so that the entire ecosystem is safe. Collectively, we think we can defeat our adversaries. We're going to do our part at Cisco. We're looking forward to partnering with everyone. And thank you all for taking the time to come attend this. And make sure you go take a look at our booth as well. And Shayla Shankar, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you.